Hi, everyone, and welcome to video 2 of profiling key players in the biblical womanhood movement. Today, I am profiling Marabel Morgan. Marabel Morgan was famous for writing a book called The Total Woman, which was published in 1973. The fastest way to describe The Total Woman is that it is a more marketable and more sexed up version of Fascinating Womanhood. And everybody kind of knows it. There are tons of write-ups comparing the two books and acknowledging that they are um, directly competing for the same audience. They've really got the same message. And it's not just the two books, it is the Total Woman classes versus the Fascinating Womanhood classes, kind of like Mary Kay versus Avon. And Marabel Morgan certainly comes out the winner in that rivalry. Fascinating Womanhood was certainly successful, but The Total Woman becomes a pop culture phenomenon. By the numbers, Total Woman is about twice as successful as Fascinating Womanhood. It sells 500,000 copies in the first year, has sold 10 million copies to date. It was on the 1974 bestsellers list. But what gives Marabel Morgan and The Total Woman the edge in this rivalry between her and Helen Andelin? For one, The Total Woman is just a much tighter, more condensed book. Fascinating Womanhood was self published and it shows. It is 472 pages long and it really did not need to be. Helen Andelin does a lot of meandering, just repeating herself, getting off topic. Marabel Morgan does not waste words. Her book is only 200 pages long. She just gets to the point. Marabel Morgan also just knows her audience very well. She has this writing style that's just very fun and approachable, and Total Woman is just a more enjoyable book to read. The second reason is just Marabel Morgan herself. She is extremely good at self-marketing. She has this public persona that is very appealing. I think that The Total Woman is ridiculous and harmful, and I disagree with 99.99% of it, but even I can't help but like Marabel Morgan. The thing that really makes Total Woman take off in a way that Fascinating Womanhood never quite did is, like I said, it is a sexed up version of Fascinating Womanhood. Helen Andelin did not talk about sex very much in Fascinating Womanhood. She has one chapter on it, very prim, she's very proper, she does not get into details much. Marabel Morgan is the opposite of prim and proper, and she is not afraid to get into details. She makes suggestions like initiate sex in unusual places, do it in a hammock, do it in the backseat of your car, do it under the dining room table. But what Marabel Morgan and The Total Woman really become associated with is this idea of costumes and role playing. Don't wear the same outfit 2 days in a row. Wear a different costume every evening. He comes home, he doesn't know who he's getting. Is it going to be the cowgirl? Is it going to be the pixie fairy? Is it going to be the pirate vixen? You get the idea. This book came on the market at a time where a lot of women did not know that they could enjoy sex. I think a lot of women tried the ideas in The Total Woman were suddenly finding sex to be fun and exciting and enjoyable. And there is a sitcom episode that came out during this time that supports my theory. This was an episode of the show Maude starring Bea Arthur. And it starts out with Bea Arthur and her husband showing up to the front door, and the wife comes to the door thinking that they are the husband, ringing the doorbell. And she's dressed in a trench coat and she throws it open and all she has is saran wrap on. And of course, she's so embarrassed and she finally admits that she's been going to these Total Woman classes. Then later, when she and her friend, Bea Arthur, are talking together about the classes, she says, "You know, I don't like the part where I have to do all the pampering. I'm supposed to bring my husband his newspaper, and I'm supposed to bring him his pipe and his slippers and make him his favorite meals, and I don't enjoy that part. But what she is enjoying is that they're having much more frequent, much more exciting, and passionate sex. Meanwhile, the husband is in the other room talking to his friend, and he is saying he likes the pampering, but he's beginning to think that all the sex might be too much of a good thing. I am putting Marabel Morgan and The Total Woman on this list of key players in the biblical womanhood movement because, believe it or not, The Total Woman was a Christian book. And that may sound surprising given that it has this reputation as being basically a sex book, but it certainly is being marketed as a Christian book to a Christian audience. The book is published by Marabel, which is a publishing house that was started by Dwight L. Moody and his brother-in-law. Marabel is still around. It is a division of the Baker Publishing Group, which is a Christian publisher. Marabel Morgan is not heavy on scripture in The Total Woman, but she does use it. And part of her book tour is the Christian conference circuit. I mentioned in my last video that Helen Andelin was not an evangelical Christian, she was a Mormon. So Marabel Morgan takes Helen Andelin's ideas and teaching and she rips them off as a evangelical Christian and publishes them under a Christian publisher. So we can very clearly see this cross-pollination of ideas that began circulating in Mormon circles and transfer over to evangelical Christian circles. I'm not saying that those ideas were original to Mormon culture. I think a lot of these ideas were simply just American culture. But the lift is so obvious that it's not really valid for people to say, oh, Helen Andelin doesn't have anything to do with biblical womanhood because she's Mormon. Marabel Morgan, 10 years later, was teaching exactly the same thing, plus the sex stuff, and the Christian publishing industry was platforming her. Total Woman comes out in 1973. The second wave of feminism is really in full swing. There has also been time for the second wave of feminism to develop some rifts. There was a rift between the moderate feminists, who are represented by Betty Friedan, and the radical feminists. Betty Friedan took a very diplomatic approach to reform. She was not afraid to work within existing structures, even though they were male dominated. The radical feminists came out of a group that had tried to find common cause with the socialists, and they just encountered all kinds of misogyny and sexism and antagonism from the men in the Socialist Party. So, out of that experience, they decided that making alliances with men was just not going to work. Their philosophy is basically, why would men want to have a gender equal society when what they have right now benefits them like it does? The radical feminists decide to boycott anything that they consider to be a male dominated institution. For a lot of them, that includes marriage and the nuclear family. That leads them to stage these demonstrations that are meant to wake women up to their own oppression. These demonstrations are highly publicized. They are covered very rapidly by the media because they make good news. So people are turning their TVs on and they're seeing feminists dressed up as witches. They're seeing them putting on mock wedding ceremonies with the bride dressed up in chains. They're seeing women burning their bras. This is where the bra burning trope actually comes from. And the ordinary person who is tuning in and watching that does not see that there's a difference between the moderate feminists, who are more represented by Betty Friedan, and these radical feminists who just want to burn everything down. And you can really see how the marketing for The Total Woman plays into that. Now, Marabel Morgan did not take on the feminists directly or by name. When it was brought up that what she was teaching in her book was obviously very different than feminism, she would just say, well, they should just do what makes them happy. But the distinction is very clear, and that is how the media is presenting it. When she comes on for TV interviews or when she's being interviewed for newspapers, they're always prefacing it with this comparison between her and the feminists, usually in a way that makes her look favorable. So Marabel Morgan and the Total Woman phenomenon are a way for anti-feminists to point to a group of women and say, see, feminism isn't even what women want. So whether Marabel Morgan intends to or not, she becomes kind of a anti-feminist icon. Another step along the way towards carving out this niche in the publishing industry of anti-feminist books that are written by women for women.